Hello, everybody, and hello, Jack, for the 100th time. I think you don't need an introduction anymore if you have
No.
been following this podcast for a while. And we are once again back to talk about the tests. And you covered it live in Jerez again with Simon, I believe. If I'm correct, I didn't watch any after the flag. I'm sorry. I just read a few articles because I was super busy those last couple of days. Like yesterday was my birthday and I had stuff to do. And so, yeah, I'm happy to talk to you again. And I'm very grateful that you are back with me. So, how are you? How's been life lately?
Yeah, good. All fine. I mean, as you know, been fairly busy with the MotoGP stuff, but no, it's been all right so far. I hope the hangover this morning wasn't too bad from the birthday. I
No,
don't know. You didn't say if you went out for beers or not, but I know you went out for dinner.
yeah, I had a few drinks. We were at a restaurant which serves like deer and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had a very nice steak from a deer. And we had like one or two drinks, but I had university this morning. And
Ah, okay.
like, I don't know if it's in Europe, like Labor Day is always free. Like, I have always a free
Uh,
day on my birthday since
yeah, we
forever.
had we had a holiday as well, but I didn't know
Okay.
what it was called. So Labor Day, I
Uh,
guess. Yeah.
I mean, in German it's Labor Day, so I have no idea what's in Spain or Britain for the sake of it.
Yeah. No, I
Okay,
don't take much notice.
yeah. So no, I had no hangover because I had university this morning. I had to show up at 8 a.m. and
Oof,
I've
early.
been there for basically the whole day. We finished all of our courses at 5:15. So it was a busy day, and we plan on going out with all the boys from university tomorrow. So I guess it will be more difficult Saturday, and that's why I actually wanted to do it today.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a good reason.
So you didn't have anything to do with counting the fans in Jerez, right?
No, thankfully not. Yeah, a little bit of a cock up, but these things happen. I guess we've learned our lesson for next time. But the real positive thing was like, obviously, it was a brilliant weekend anyway, and I think it was still like the biggest attendance in the ref for a decade. So, yeah, still pretty good. But no, unfortunately, it wasn't the all-time record.
I was in Jerez 2 years ago, actually for my birthday as well. And it was where Mark had those injuries stuffs, but he was
Hmm.
actually racing, and it wasn't too busy. We were sitting in the last corner, and obviously a lot of fans were there, but not that you could speak out of a record attendance, you know.
Yeah.
And when I read this or when I heard it on the broadcast, I was like, really? I mean, and I thought like, okay, Mark must have had a huge impact on the fans being competitive now again and stuff. So it was very, very surprising for me. But now we clarified the thing.
Yeah, yeah, all clarified now. But I mean, to be fair, because my first time for the GP in the ref was last year, and then obviously coming back this year, and it was definitely a fair chunk busier this year. But last year when we went, everyone said, "Oh, all of a sudden it's got busier again." They said that 18. No, what year was it? What year did you go? 22? Did you go?
22, yeah.
Yeah, they said 22. It was like there wasn't the usual crowd that like they would expect, but
Yeah.
yeah, not too bad. Hopefully we go again next year, and then we tip over the 200,000 mark.
France has the record, right?
Yeah, 271 or something like that. I can't remember what it was last year.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual test. And I would like to go with the worst manufacturers first because I feel like it's the most interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah.
And I would like to start with Honda. Obviously, they are in deep shit, and we've been talking for Honda about Honda for years now, I guess. And with their new bike, obviously they have concessions. They can test as much as they want, or as much as the tires allow. I would think it's limited by tires, right? And they can develop the engine. They brought some new aerodynamic on Stefan Bradl's bike.
Hmm.
So let's first start with like what are the exact issues of the 24 Honda? What does it do well? What doesn't do it
Um,
well?
what does it do well? I mean, that's obviously a tricky question. If you
It's a
talk to
short list.
John, yeah, yeah, it definitely is a short list, unfortunately. If you talk to Zarko, actually, he says it's really good on the first like entry phase of the corner, it's not so bad there, and in braking, it actually feels quite nice. Um, the trouble is that's kind of where it stops. The engine's strong, like it's good top horsepower, and the top speed isn't too bad compared to how much it's struggling for rear grip. But yeah, it's kind of the only really strong point it has is that braking feeling. It's not too bad. It's got decent enough stability on the brakes in the initial tipping, but then it's struggling everywhere else. Mid corner turning, the grip on the edge of the tire, and particularly the drive grip out of the corner. So it's a little bit of a nightmare for Honda at the minute, and like they're so far off, even though they made like essentially a 7 or 8 tenth step forward over the winter from last year to this year, and it's like they seem like they're even further back than they were last year, which is a bit of a piss take, really. It just shows you how much Ducati and everyone has improved. But yeah, unfortunately for them, it's a bit of a head against the wall moment, really.
I remember talking to Simon after Valencia, one of the few episodes where you couldn't make it,
Yeah,
and he and I were talking about Ducati just bringing the new engine, and we were talking about like what can Ducati really do better, and all of a sudden they're like half a second faster. So
yeah, right.
it's very very crazy. And regarding Honda, I believe their new bike is like 8 kilos lighter than the old one. I read
Yeah,
somewhat in winter, and it's still crazy that you would think like it's difficult to make progress when you're at top like Ducati, and it's easier to make progress when you're at the bottom like Honda, especially with concessions and stuff, but nothing. And even like the new bike, I believe nobody really liked it. And like, let's start with what was different on the new bike. Obviously, we've all seen the Arrow, and if not, I believe you have a new Instagram account where you post like your photos. I saw,
yeah.
right?
It's my little just kind of on the side fun account, a little bit of a secret. So yeah, but it's yeah, I post some photos on there because I have like thousands and thousands of photos. I thought there's no point just sitting around on my laptop doing nothing, so I started posting for
What's it called?
the last tenth.
Okay, so check it out, and then you can see the pictures of the new Honda. So, what was different on it?
So on Brado's bike, it was essentially everything was different. The in terms of the hardware, the chassis was different. We know that for sure. We don't know if the engine was different. Probably not. Or maybe there was a small update in that bike, but we don't think so because that would be probably too many things to change at once. But yeah, the chassis was different. It was kind of still on the same fork path, but there was a lot more cuts and welds in it. So they'd obviously kind of really dived into trying to figure out some different flex and the strength characteristics of it. And then the other big thing, the visual thing that everyone would have seen was just the aero, like a completely different design. The top wings were actually more like kind of how the first version of their top wings were from pre-season. They were quite skinny, but then the side pods were much different to what they have on the current bike at the moment and much larger. And then they had the downwash ducts, kind of like the KTM style at the minute, that had like the scoop underneath as well, underneath the main fairing. So yeah, like completely different aero setup, and the big rear wing at the back and the tail unit was all different as well. So they've obviously done a lot of work. And I think like one positive thing from it is even though the bike unfortunately hasn't worked again, um, it's positive for Honda that they've like managed to build a full new bike and bring it to Jerez Test, where usually it's always we get this full new bike in Misano towards the start of the last third of the year. So at least they've already kind of ruled out one direction. And actually, Mir was saying this. He said, now we have a clear direction to go in. So hopefully things are better. But I mean, as Crafar was saying to me when we were just waiting for the plane on Tuesday to come back, like they've turned the bike upside down like 3 or 4 times now. Different chassis, different aeros, and still the one thing that they haven't done a drastic overhaul on is the engine. And you kind of think, come on, just change it, for fuck's sake! Like just change it for the sake of it. Just do something different with it and see if it works. Because they're obviously they're not scared of spending the time and the money to R&D something new. So just try the engine this time.
I need to stop sending you my notes because like it was basically the next point. Um, so, okay, engine aside, but why was the bike still shit? Everything's different, but nobody liked it. And what
Yeah,
are the problems with the new bike?
I mean, from the sounds of, well, we don't know exactly what the problems were, but Taka particularly said that not much changes. So that essentially just tells us all the main problems are still the same. The riding style is probably still the same, and the general feeling of the bike is overall the same. To be honest, like none of them said a particular area where they felt like a slight improvement. I think only on the chassis side, one of the riders, and I can't remember who now, said in this debrief for the media that maybe the turning was a little bit better, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't a big enough step. So, you know, yeah, they changed the whole bike and it has the same issues. It's a bit frustrating.
You already touched on the engine, and obviously Honda has concessions where they are allowed to update the engine. And I remember from talking to you, talking to Simon, that most of your rear grip comes from your engine. And Honda has a rear grip issue. Like basically, they always had, even in the successful years with Mark, but he
Mm.
could ride it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, why don't they bring a new engine? Why don't they try to do things with the firing order like KTM did, I believe, last season, like for the
Yeah.
23 season? And when it's basically the heart of the motorcycle, the heart and soul. So Honda always, is it still a screamer? Is it a bing bang? What's the problem with the firing order? Do we know anything there?
I mean, it's a big bang, yeah, like everything else is. But then there's different firing orders of a big bang, different variations, and we essentially believe that what everyone runs now is this like twin pulse big bang, where like two of the cylinders fire very close together, then there's a gap in the cycle, and the other two cylinders fire very close together. Um, why Honda would stick with their current one? I mean, they are very clever engineers. They could give you 100 reasons for why they would stick with their current one instead of changing. But from a pure kind of idiot's outlook on from the outside, looking on the inside, you know, it sounds completely different to all the other engines. And you kind of always think, well, if you're doing something differently, then you must be doing something wrong. Um, so there's kind of that sense. But, I'm sure that they have, as I say, a list of 100 reasons as to why they would stick with this firing order and not change to what we believe everyone else is running.
I mean, if you're the last four bikes, if you even make it to the finishing line, you're doing something wrong as well. So you might as
Yeah,
well change it.
yeah,
And from the outside, it looks like they're just putting new arrow on a shitbox, and trying to basically fix the issue by putting on new arrow. But I'm wondering, because if I was a CEO of Honda of HRC, which I obviously am not, and obviously I have no clue. But I would build it like from the inside out. Focus on the engine, make the engine right, because you're not winning anyway. So at least get the engine right and get the electronics right. Because I think this is a big issue with Honda as well. Like they're basically the only manufacturer with on throttle high sides. Then you build a chassis around it where you incorporate the whole aero thing, and then you can have a more or less competitive bike. But that would be my take on it, and it looks like Honda is going at the exact opposite direction. So, what's your opinion on this?
um, but it's obviously a difficult one, isn't it? Because as you say, we don't know how to develop a motorcycle ourselves. But interestingly, Crafar always says about like the Aprilia and the Ducati and all this, and from what he hears from all the people that he knows within the teams, because Simon knows so many engineers and stuff like this, and he always says that the biggest thing is those bikes are supposedly designed alongside the aero. It's not like you have an engine and a chassis and then you bolt on the aero to kind of force it to fit. It's like the aero is an integral part. And even though Honda are for sure getting much better with implementing their aero, and we're seeing their aero take more complex shapes, and it looks like it's a much better step forward than what it was 2 seasons ago. it does seem like it's kind of they have this bike, but then they've bolted the aero on, and they're trying to make up for the bike's weaknesses with the aero instead of developing also the bike then to enhance the aero strengths, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a tricky one, really. I mean, yeah, in terms of development, what do they do? Do they completely start again? But then they kind of have started again for this year. The chassis was the biggest change we've seen for a while, and the aero was the biggest change we'd seen, really, or the most extensive aero package. So, and obviously those two things would have been developed in conjunction. So, you do wonder what is the next thing, the next method that they have to employ to make it work better. Um, Difficult to say, really.
I was having a thought yesterday or 2 days ago about the 27 rule set.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it even realistic for Honda? And let's put Yamaha into the conversation as well, because I would like to talk about them next. Is it really possible for them or realistic that they can build a bike within those rules who are obviously in place for this season and 25, 26, that they can build a bike which is competitive when you compare it with a Ducati, with a KTM, with an Aprilia? Is it even possible, or has Honda and Yamaha come to the conclusion, okay, let's try to survive those 2 years or 2.5 years, 2 and 3 quarters, whatever you want to call it, and then come with a good bike for 27?
um, yeah, difficult.
Like, first of all, is it even possible for Honda and Yamaha to be competitive in this short time span?
Yes, I would say so. I think to be competitive in terms of like right up the top, or at least being a bike that can push top five. Um, I think for Honda it's more possible than Yamaha, and probably a lot of people might disagree with me there. But I've always had this kind of feeling about this current rule set that it just suits the V4s better than the inline fours. Um, and I think you have to take the classic case of Aprilia, where in 2020 they started out with a completely new bike, completely new engine, changed it from a 75-degree V4 to a 90-degree V4. And in their first year, their results with the 2020 bike weren't any better than what they were with the 19 bike that was nowhere near the level it needed to be. And in fact, in 2020, it actually looked worse. But then you skip forward 2 years, Aleix fights for, where did he finish? Fourth place in the World Championship in 2022, right? Was that what it was?
I don't remember,
I think
but
he did.
when they brought the new bike in 2020,
Yeah.
let's hypothetically say Honda brings a new bike in 24.
Yeah.
After 2 seasons, Aprilia wasn't competitive at all. I mean, they were competitive in 23 and 24. They had this miracle win in Argentina. They
Yeah.
had a good podium, but Aprilia was really competitive in 23, especially in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, you brought Aprilia, and it kind of proves my point that it just takes time to be competitive. And I don't know if Honda and Yamaha just have the time. I fully agree with you that
Mm.
the V4 is better suited for this rule set, because a lot of the deficiencies the V4 has can be made up with the aero, and therefore the inline 4 loses its advantages. And yeah, therefore I don't know if it's, I mean, maybe possible to not be in the top 6 all the time, in the bottom 6, I'm sorry, all the time, but to win races, finish on podiums, and even world championships, like, I don't think it's
No,
possible
no.
within this rule set. And I
Well,
could imagine that both of those manufacturers kind of accepted it.
I agree with you on that in terms of like winning races consistently and fighting for a world championship. I don't think that's possible. But in terms of a top five, occasionally competitive level, I think that's absolutely capable. It's just they have to make the key decisions when they need to, and they need to be aggressive in their development of it and really just have some better ideas than what they've had so far, which is always tricky. Um, but, like my example of Aprilia, in 22, they found enough competitiveness to be on the podium for the first time, and then at least be in that conversation for like, oh, they're a solid mid pack, and they're working their way up. And then, as you say, it was 23 where they really started to take off. But I think Honda can get to that Aprilia 22 level for sure in the next 2 years. It's just, whether they make the right decisions in development to be able to do that.
Because if I was them, I just basically would do what I said about the engine, because I think everything you learn about the 1000cc engine will benefit you in the 850cc engine, because I believe the bore is going to be the same as far as I know from the engine.
Well, I mean, I can't confirm anything. Just, obviously all this, but you guys will obviously find out sooner or later what the regulations will be. But the rumors that are out there, some of them are true, some of them are not.
So you don't have to tell us everything or anything, but do you know how the rule set's going to look?
I personally do, but I'll say
Okay,
this
okay.
now. I can't tell you anything.
No, obviously you can't. I mean, this would be breaking news on this
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
podcast,
yeah,
and
yeah.
no, but I fully understand.
Yeah,
So, yeah, regarding Honda and Yamaha, I think everything they will learn on this engine would benefit them. But as far as I
yeah.
know, the aero will be reduced significantly. The ride height devices will be reduced or banned, and I think for them, it's the objective to stop embarrassing themselves every weekend and then put on a basically Mercedes F1 thing when they changed the rules in 2014, and then all of a sudden they're competitive. So if I
Yeah,
was Honda and Yamaha, I would do what I said earlier and focus on the engine, first of all, and second of all, focus on the 27 rule set as soon as they know it. I don't. Do they know already what the rule set is?
yeah. I presume so. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the manufacturers have been involved in the discussions for the rule set since the very start. So
Yeah. So let's talk about Yamaha. And I think Yamaha has the huge advantage over Honda in this sense that they have good riders. I think Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins are far better riders than any Honda rider.
Mhm.
And again, like, what are the exact issues with the Yamaha? What are their problems?
Well, Yamaha is strangely having a lack of turning, which is fucking hell. Something that if you said to yourself 10 years ago, you'd be like, what? um, so, a strange lack of turning in the mid corner, which, yeah, as I say, weird one for an inline four, particularly for the Yamaha, which has always, always, always been its strong point. Um, and then their other big strong point with the fact that the engine is so smooth, and it's why so many times in the past you saw rookies that are good riders but nothing outstanding get on a Yamaha in their rookie season and do well. Like I always think of the case of Hafiz Syrin, who's a good rider. Don't get me wrong, Hafiz Syrin is a good rider, but he got into MotoGP through some clever politics and also some good results that he had in Moto 2.
And
Um,
Jonas Folger's illness.
Yes, and also
That
this.
was like the big thing.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Actually, I forgot about that. Which was a big shame actually because Jonas was doing well. Again, a rookie on a Yamaha that probably had some better results than many people thought he would achieve. But I think Shirin was the standout one where he went actually pretty good, and not many people really thought he was going to do that, and that was partly because the Yamaha's two strengths with a very smooth engine that was really easy to ride, easy to control, was good on the rear tire, and then also the great turning it had. And it just the Yamaha now doesn't have either of those anymore, which is so strange. But the engine is too aggressive, and they were saying about like when the tire starts to go off, then it it kind of the bike starts tying itself in knots and it becomes really aggressive. And Fabio had a big issue in I can't remember which day it was, whether it was Saturday or Sunday, but he had a big issue in Jerez where he started getting really severe arm pump in his right arm, just from hanging on too hard because the bike was being aggressive and shaking the handlebars and stuff like this. So yeah, two strange issues for Yamaha, but that's their reality now.
Do you think that this is a result of years of Fabio calling for more horsepower?
Um, I think the horsepower has definitely had an impact on it for sure. Like whenever you chase more horsepower with an engine, it essentially means you're asking for a slightly more aggressive engine. Um, that's not a rule of thumb, but like that's what happens more often than not. Um, And definitely last year's engine was way too aggressive. It was a real nightmare. Like you've heard Cal Crutchlow say about it in testing that he believes Yamaha need an engine that's slower, less horsepower, less torque, and is just allows them to actually use the rear grip they already have. So then they can be quicker on the straight because they're quicker coming out the corner. So there's definitely some truth in that, I think, to that Fabio was always asking for more horsepower and it's maybe kicked him in the arse. But you also can't blame Fabio asking for more horsepower because they do need it. Like that's a simple fact. But they have to be more careful in their engine development, I think, because of that trait of the Yamaha engine that was always so smooth.
Well, Yamaha was also in the unfortunate situation that they had a young world champion who was their only competitive rider, who didn't have a lot of MotoGP experience and didn't ride or even doesn't ride any other bikes. And when you hear like Maverick talking about Yamaha, Valentino talking about Yamaha, Andrea Dovizioso talking about Yamaha, back when they all had those riders that they needed more rear grip and it wasn't a power issue. And I think it's always bad for a manufacturer if you have one guy to listen to. And Simon always says that if you have a super talented rider, he doesn't make the bike faster because he's overriding all the problems and therefore hiding it a little bit. So I could see Fabio being a part of the problem by just being good, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely some truth in that as well. Like they always say, the best test riders are the riders that are 1 to 2 seconds off the pace. I think Michele Pirro is like a prime example of a rider that has found his perfect niche to make a fantastic career out of his talent. Like he was obviously a good rider and had some great performances in Moto 2 and when he raced full time in MotoGP and whatever else he's done. But he's not a top level rider. Like he's not a top level MotoGP rider, but he has made a fantastic test rider for Ducati. And there's no coincidence in the fact that Ducati have developed this bike that now everyone can ride, and all the rookies get on it and they go well on it. So I think there's definitely a part in that with Fabio where he's so good, like the natural talent is quite clearly there, and then he's also learned how to get the best out of a Yamaha with just what it does naturally. He hasn't had the experience before of a bike that had good rear grip, so he just learned a way around it, and that's all he ever has known.
So they brought new aero. They had this Aprilia style front wing, but it
Mm-hmm.
has like 3 wings.
Yeah,
And the Aprilia one only has 2. And the previous Yamaha one always had not more than 2.
yeah, too.
And now obviously 3, which theoretically would mean more downforce at the front. And they have those KTM style wings at the side, it looks like. I believe my girlfriend's coming home, so I have to greet the dogs in a second.
Yeah,
You know?
go for it.
So I definitely think they made some improvements there just from the looks of it because it looks more sophisticated. But and also they brought a new frame, I believe. And previously we talked about you have to combine the aero in the whole bike and not just put it on there. So what are the benefits of the new aero and the new frame? What do those riders say about it?
Um, the benefits of the new frame were, well, if you talk to one rider, the benefits were negatives. Um, trying to think now, who was it? I can't remember who said it was good and who said it was bad now. I think it was Alex that didn't like it. Yeah, it was Alex. Go on, do your good boyfriend job. Very nice.
Hello. She's super excited. She came into. I'm sitting in my bedroom at the moment, and
Uh-huh.
my girlfriend has a wonderful mirror with the lights behind it where she does her makeup. So I decided this is going to be my podcast spot for the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just came into our bedroom and was super excited to see me.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine.
yeah, I'm sorry. Please continue on the new Yamaha.
Yeah, Alex didn't like the chassis. I can't remember exactly what he said now. I think he said that there wasn't really any change and there was no extra benefits. But then I did see that Fabio said in the debrief with the journalists that he did like some things of it. He said there was a little bit more turning, but again, not enough and all this sort of stuff. Uh, so the chassis seems like it's probably just going to get ruled out, which actually the chassis was a bigger change than we've seen Yamaha do in the last several years. Like Fabio actually said he could really feel the difference with it, which was quite surprising. Usually, every time Yamaha bring a chassis, it's always, yeah, you feel the difference? No, not really. And that's it. Um, so at least Yamaha are being more aggressive with the changes they're making, which is only a good thing because that way they will hopefully land on something that works better, quicker. But yeah, the chassis, I reckon, probably just it will either go back and they'll rework it, or that'll be it. We won't see it again.
And they do have a test in Mugello after Le Mans, right?
Yes, I
To
believe so.
confirm everything they learned in Jerez, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when it is, but yeah, I saw that they have that.
Which is a very nice feature to have to confirm things on other tracks, which other manufacturers don't have this luxury.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
other
true.
manufacturers finish on the podium, so
Yeah, which one would you rather have?
so Yamaha also has the luxury of updating their engine.
hmm
Do we know about anything with the engine?
Um, we don't at the minute. They didn't. Well, I don't think they had anything at the test. I haven't read the media debriefs, and I only did Alex's interview. I didn't do Fabio's at the end of the day. So I don't know. I'd have to go back and check the media debriefs on that one. But for sure, Yamaha will have a new engine sometime in the future. We know that they've been saying about it that they were going to have an engine soon. Actually, I remember now because Mayo Merigali said they didn't have an engine here, but it should be coming soon. So hopefully they will maybe test it at that private test they have in Mugello, and if not, then obviously there's the official MotoGP test after the Italian Grand Prix as well. So we'll see, but hopefully it's a little bit smoother and gives them a bit more rear grip.
That would be awesome.
Mm.
And Yamaha has the huge disadvantage of only having two bikes.
hmm
So we have had a lot of rumors about Pramac. Did you see this stupid announcement they made before the race?
Yeah, I actually sent it to the social team chat. I was like, "Do we know what this is?" And everyone was like, "Oh, okay, not sure." But yeah, then it turned out to be the traditional dress of the dancers, I think, or whatever it was.
Hooray. So do we or are we confident that Yamaha will have a satellite team because it sounds this way?
um,
And do we know anything regarding Pramac?
well, I'll be confident they'll have a satellite team. To be fair, I think there's a good chance. I do think there's a good chance. There's some pretty strong rumors, but again, they are literally just rumors. The latest whole scenario and kind of movement is that Pramac will actually stay with Ducati. This was a rumor that we heard over the weekend. Um, Pramac will stay with Ducati, and then you can make your own assumptions up as to who will be there. Obviously, Furby Gallagher has a contract for next year, and that is allegedly with Ducati, with Pramac, sorry. And then Mark obviously wants a factory bike, so maybe he goes there. But the knock-on effect was that maybe Grassini would go to Yamaha,
But
which
as far as I'm concerned, they have a contract with Ducati, so they would.
I can't remember when theirs is up. I think
I
it's
think Valentino's team and Pramac's team
yeah.
are due at the end of this season, so they could switch manufacturers. And as far as I'm concerned, Gresini has one until the end of 26.
Okay, okay.
Could be
Because
25, but I'm pretty sure they have a longer contract.
right, okay. Well, this rumor suggested that Grassini would switch, but it was the first time I'd heard Grassini come into the conversation at all. I mean, obviously, Pramac would be a nice fit for Yamaha for sure. The one person it would really suck for is Franco Morbidelli.
But I think
because
he would go to Valentino's team.
for sure, I mean, he would be running out of there with all of his stuff in hand if they'd signed with Yamaha. But yeah, I don't know. I hope there's a good chance that Yamaha get a satellite team. I think they, as we know, they need it just for the extra data because it is a huge disadvantage, as you say. They just have the two bikes. But which team? It seems all a bit chaotic at the moment. So hopefully, one of those rumors has some truth to it, and we'll see 4 M1s next year.
And obviously, with Pramac, there is no sporting reason why they should move away for Yamaha. And I have two theories about it. First of all, is to bluff to get a better deal with Ducati.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just throw it out there, talk with Yamaha. Maybe those conversations were even real, and they did it just to poke the bear a little bit, or they have some big incentives money wise that Yamaha just throws business at them, where they have maybe something that Ducati doesn't provide them, which I can't think of too many things because they already have everything they want from Ducati.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a money thing, or maybe it's a thing with closer factory relations where the staff can move up to a factory team because obviously Lynn Jarvis is going
Mm-hmm.
to depart Yamaha. So those are like my two theories. And do you know anything about the incentives for Pramac?
I mean, the incentives for Pramac, I think everyone immediately jumps to. There must be some fair old wedge of money being thrown around by Yamaha, because in terms of purely sporting, like it is just from what we see in the here and now, it's pretty ridiculous to say that you would switch away from factory Ducatis and then go and have some Yamahas at the moment. Obviously, there is a lot behind the scenes because even though Fabio Quartararo is being paid 12 million supposedly, which is it's a nice chunk of cash, um, there has to be something there for Fabio to keep his faith with Yamaha in the long term, or at least like in the next couple of years, sporting wise, for him to really be like, okay, I believe in this project. And for his reasoning in the interviews he's done since that contract was announced, he's obviously said a lot about like we have big things coming in the next few years. So maybe there is something behind the scenes that we don't know about. It's been discussed a lot recently whether Yamaha would build a V4. I personally don't think they will. I don't see it, but maybe they are. So that's always a possibility. So yeah, that would be my sporting thing. There must be something behind the scenes that we don't know.
Yeah, and this brings us again to the 27 rule set. Maybe Yamaha presented Fabio a concept for 27 where he can win on. In theory, the rule set should be more suitable to the inline four. And it's a quite interesting thing to consider because things are not going to be the same anymore after 27. So I would like to talk about the European manufacturers where things are
Mm-hmm.
obviously a little bit better. And I or previously talked about this on the podcast, but not directly to you. So I would start by apologizing to KTM because I've been very critical of KTM over the past few years,
Yeah, you
and
were you were
with
strong on KTM last time.
with my, let's say, level of information and what I saw, I thought um I had a pretty good opinion on it. But now I have some more information in
Mm-hmm.
the names of Pedro Acosta, which came where I came to the conclusion that maybe KTM isn't as bad that we also thought. Maybe it's just that their riders are complete shit. You know, Brad Binder always has been this guy where KTM thinks, okay, he is going to be our first world champion. He is our superstar. And Miguel Oliveira isn't really cutting it on the Aprilia. And we thought he would be a lot better than he actually is. And yeah, the whole Tech 3 thing is another one. But I think that riders like Brad Binder, Jack Miller, Miguel Oliveira were made better than they actually are. And somebody like Pedro comes along, and by his second race, he is the best KTM rider. Obviously, not everybody is Pedro. He's a once-in-a-generation talent. In my opinion, the best rookie since Marc Marquez. And he has a huge upside. But still, it's not normal that you are the best rider by your second race, you know? And he was smoking both factory riders in Portimao, in Austin, and in Jerez. You could have made an argument that he at least stayed on the bike in the sprint and could have been on the front row without his crash. So, and if you take Pedro away, let's pretend Pedro doesn't exist. KTM still has the same issues they always had. You know, it's Brad Binder had a good race in Qatar, and then we're nowhere in, not nowhere, but not where they're supposed to be, if they are this good as we all made them. So maybe KTM wasn't as bad. They just lacked the superstar rider Honda had with Marc Marquez, or Ducati has with Pecco, and now Marc, obviously, and with Jorge Martin. And also, I believe Maverick Vinales is a fantastic rider. He proved to us over the past couple of rounds that if he's on, he's on. He can be the best rider on the grid on his day, but he also can be a nightmare when it's not his day. So, to conclude everything, I just think that KTM needs to get their rider lineup straight, because the bike seems to be quite good. And I think somebody like, let's say, Enea Bastianini, maybe if he becomes available, should be better for them than Brad Binder or Jack Miller.
Yeah, Brad's an interesting topic because obviously he's been under fire a lot. You'd say in the last like 6 months or so, because even when he was having incredible rides at the end of last season, he was making these really silly errors, and sometimes making the same error twice in the same weekend, like he did in Assen last year. Which is okay, the margins are fine, and the bike is moving at 140 miles an hour, but you can't make that same error twice. And that was a strike on Brad's record that weekend in Assen. Then
For the
obviously,
record, he violated track limits 2 times in the last lap, and therefore was demoted 1 position in sprint and race. And
correct.
lost the podium, if I remember correctly.
He did, yeah. So a real kind of egg on face moment there for Brad. Then obviously Thailand, incredible race, and like Pecco and Martin, that race were on fire. They were riding so well, so fast, and Brad was with them the whole race long. And that shows two things: that one, the KTM can do it when it's on, and Brad can do it when he's on. But again, he made this small error in the last lap and gave up the second place. Again, track limits. And then obviously in Valencia, he made the same mistake twice in the same weekend again at the infield section. I can't remember which turn it is, turn 11 or something, where he just went wide, threw away a race win on the Sunday. And in the sprint, I can't remember what position he was in, but made that mistake and lost some positions as well. So it's like, Brad is obviously a good rider. I'm not shitting on Brad Binder here. Like, I
Everybody
really
in MotoGP is a good rider,
Yeah. But no,
and
I think
Brad is a Moto3 world champion, and I think he is a solid rider, but I don't think he is as good as we all thought he could be.
I think it's difficult to say that he's not as good as we all thought he is. I think in terms of his talent is as good as we think it is. Because I don't think anyone goes around thinking that Brad is as good as Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta. But he's
there was like this thought, okay, if the KTM is on par with Ducati, Brad can win a world championship. Because he always seemed like the guy who brings out the best out of the bike, even on a bad weekend. And again, take Pedro Acosta away and put him in Portimao, you would say, okay, it was a nice race. The KTM's just not as good as the Ducati, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree with that as well. But it's tricky where to place Brad, though. Like especially after recent form and results and stuff like this. And we're sat here after 4 rounds criticizing Brad, but let's not forget that the first round of the year in Qatar, he was pretty bloody awesome. Like he was really, really good.
But that's my criticism of him. He's always up and down. And I
He is
used
up
to
and down.
think it was the KTM with the
Yeah,
steel frame and
yeah,
stuff, but maybe it was just, maybe it's a little bit the KTM, maybe it's a little bit Brad Binder, and together it's big. But
yeah.
Pedro kind of looks like he's not faced by this inconsistency.
Yeah, I would agree and say it's a little bit of Brad and a little bit of the KTM. And then I think it just goes to show then like what a super talent Pedro Acosta is, because he's come in already and apart from Jerez where the KTMs were struggling with this mystery chatter issue that suddenly appeared, he's been so consistent and so brilliant, and he's getting the pace out of the bike immediately. Uh, yeah, unbelievable. Like there's no words to describe how good Pedro Acosta is being at the minute and how good he will be in the future. Like he genuinely is a Marc Marquez. And yeah, I don't think Brad's on that level, but I do think Brad is incredibly good. Like he's top 5 or 6 riders in MotoGP, I believe. But he needs to figure out these small things, like these
Well,
random weekends where he's struggling with getting the best out of the bike and the small mistakes as well. So hopefully we'll see Brad overcome that. And I think if he does, he has shown already that he can have these spurts of consistency where he's absolutely fantastic and can really challenge the top Ducatis.
so do
Did,
you
could
really want to? Do you really want to go there and compare top 5 riders? Because
I?
from the top of my head, I can think, let's say, Pecco, Mark, Enea, Pedro, Jorge Martin, Fabio Quartararo. All riders I think are clearly better than Brad Binder.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty tricky, but you have to take into account everything. And I think Enea is one that's hard to say he's a top 5 rider at the minute, even though I love Enea and I think he's fucking fantastic. But at the moment, what he's showing, I don't think is quite good enough.
Well, he's consistent at least.
He's consistent for sure, which is something that he didn't do in 22 when he was winning, and then next week 10th, winning next week 10th. So that's progress for sure. But like placing who is, I think it's impossible to say top 5. Top 6 you can maybe do, but like it's impossible to say who is in that top 5 or 6, because also there's like Maverick Vinales, where if you take Maverick from his one day a year where he's absolutely world beating amazing, you would say he's like the greatest rider we've ever seen in our lives. But then if you go to the next week, you're like, he's bang average, which is really frustrating with Maverick.
Yeah, but it's a pointless discussion because we will never get to a conclusion.
Exactly.
But basically, what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter how good Pedro Acosta is. You can't get outperformed like this by a rookie in his second, third, and arguably fourth race.
I agree. I wouldn't say it's an embarrassing start to the year for Brad. I wouldn't say that.
Not embarrassing for him, but when you take like the full picture, it doesn't, especially Jack. I mean, Brad, okay, with his experience, he should be better than Pedro, but for Miller, it's horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, Jack is obviously a very talented rider, but he's always had some key issues. One was hanging on to the rear tire, and then the other one was his consistency. Like he will go through periods where he's absolutely fantastic, and then he just seems to have this real struggle for the next 5 or 6 races. And Jack, unfortunately, is in one of them, and he started the year in one of them, which is a real shame, because I do think Jack, like for KTM, say if next season, Pedro is obviously going to be on that KTM factory machine next season rather than in gas. I mean, at least that's what I presume. I do think it's still worth KTM saying to Jack, here's the gas seat. But then again, he, at the minute, what he's showing is making it hard to justify that. He needs to show his good side and his good performances again for them to justify.
Well, if you go back half a year or so, I had the idea of putting Poole and Miller in Gasgas as a development team.
Yeah.
And Pedro and Brad in the factory team. That would be my 24 lineup. But
yeah.
I think we're losing away a little bit. They brought New Arrow. And
yeah,
what's up with this?
You mean KTM's new era?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, the biggest change was the side fairings. So those big kind of bulged out side fairings down low on each side of the bike. They've done something quite clever, but also like a really simple idea. They've just enclosed the whole thing. I don't think I did. I get a picture of it. Maybe I did. So maybe I'll post it on my little Instagram account, and people can go and have a look. Um, but so there's like three holes that come through. So if you think of like the bike, so say this is the each side. Let me get my hands straight here. So each side of the bike is like this, and this is one side fairing, and this is the other, and you've got the engine here in the middle. Like there's usually like kind of two inlets with where they direct air down and under, but now they've got three. There's the one that down directs the air down and under. Sorry, the two that direct the air down and under. But then they've got one above that which just guides air through and out the back of the side fairing, and it just picks it
So
up out the back.
they have those wings at the side, and then when you look at it, it kind of goes into the lower part of the fairing, and then
Yeah.
there's this little gap, and the air is basically the upper one from
Yes.
three is basically going through there.
But what they've kind of done is instead of like then it coming in underneath the wings, it's now all this like one piece, and they've kind of like sleeved it on the outside. So it's given them a bigger surface area for the ground effect side fairing on the side, and it's quite a simple idea, but it's good. And Brad said that it was a lot slippier on the straights, so probably that inlet that allows air to kind of pass through the fairing is helping a lot rather than having to hit the side fairing and then go round the side of it. Um, so yeah, he said the top speed was better with it, and he didn't comment anything bad about it. So I guess in the corners it felt similar.
What I've read is that they have more space between the bike and the asphalt and can go higher lean angles.
Ah, yeah, as well. Okay, probably.
I don't know if this is true. I hope you could confirm this.
I haven't heard that yet, to be honest. Since the test, like I had a bunch of work to do when I got back that wasn't related to the test, and then I've been off today and I'm off tomorrow, so I haven't
Okay.
really been working too much.
Also, the chattering thing is quite weird, and we texted about this after Ducati got the chattering issues in
Yeah.
Portimao.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what you said is nobody knows why a bike is chattering, and it's difficult to pinpoint, okay, that's the reason, and it could appear at one track and disappear at another. And with Ducati, it was the case. And from my understanding, Jerez is a track which is lower in grip,
Mm-hmm.
and the chattering, at least from Ducati, seems to be because they have too much grip. And so the vibrations, as far I've heard or I've read an article from Matt Oxley, and where he interviewed somebody from Aprilia, I forgot his name, and he explained perfectly why a bike is chattering. He said basically every component has its own stiffness and has its own vibration, because obviously on motorcycle everything's vibrating at a certain frequency, and every frequency is different. And if those frequencies start to overlap, then you get a
Yeah.
big frequency, and that's the chattering, or as he called, vibration, because chattering is supposedly something else. But I think it's just who you ask if it's vibration or chattering. Issue is still the same. So basically, what I was saying is that the chattering in Jerez, low grip, therefore it goes away for Ducati, I understand. And with Le Mans, which is supposed to be a high grip track, it is likely that Ducati will have some more issues there than they had in Jerez. But I don't expect an answer from you, because if you knew the solution, you would be not sitting where you are sitting right now. You'd be
Yeah, damn
somewhere
right.
in Austria and getting paid millions of euros. But you could give your educated guess why KTM struggles with chattering on a lower grip track where it's better for Ducati.
Yeah, hard to know. As you say, so for people that don't know anything at all what we're on about, chattering is a weird kind of vibration issue. It's like oscillations due to frequencies. So everything on a bike resonates. If it's the onboard camera, it has a resonating frequency, and if those resonating frequencies overlap, as you say, then they cause vibrations, and that's where you get the actual physical issue of it feeling like it's going like this in your hands.
You obviously have the better vocabulary than me.
Not really. Don't worry.
No, this word what you said with oh, what's it called? What's it?
Oscillations.
Yeah, I never heard it in my life before. I've read it in now that you said, I remember I read it in the article from at Oxy, but I didn't even bother to Google because I like, oh fuck, I won't remember anyway.
I mean, yeah, most of the shit in chattering, I don't know either. So yeah, for KTM, like it's like fuck knows, no idea why. It could be all manner of things. It could be just to do with the grip level was causing, how much the rear tire was sliding over the tarmac or something like that, and that could have been causing a slightly different frequency, a resonating frequency in some parts of the bike, and then that's why they were having issues. The interesting thing to note was KTM, Miller particularly, all weekend suffered with like clutch issues. And he said it was something that had happened before on the bike, and they know what the issue is. Whether that had any sort of underbearing issue, whether the clutch issue started out kind of very, very small and then got worse, and that caused some of the chattering issues. But I don't think so, because all four KTMs said that they were suffering with chattering. So it must have just been something. It was like the perfect storm with the grip levels, the tire choice they used, the temperature, everything. So yeah, really not too sure why. But chattering is such a mystery issue. I think like the journos like Dave Emmett and stuff recounted the story of Casey Stoner in 2011 with a Honda or 2012. And they changed like a washer on the bike, like a 10-gram part on the bike. And that's what solved the chattering issue. So it's such a fickle thing that can plague you for months and months and months, or you can change one setting thing and immediately it's gone forever. So really weird issue.
I've heard that Brad Binder tested a new front fork. I saw some pictures and it looked incredibly wild. And Jack Miller didn't, apparently. Do you know anything about the differences and advantages?
They have different front forks, but I don't think what Brad tested was anything new. He's been using these small extensions for a while. There was a picture from Kota where Brad tried some new extensions that were really tall. They were literally like this tall. They were kind of 3 or 4 inches tall type thing on top of the fork tops there. The idea, we believe, was just for helping with bumps and bump sensitivity and managing with that a bit more, which at a place like Kota would make a lot of sense because it's bumpy as hell around there. But then for Jerez, he switched back to his usual fork setup, and he said like straight away on Friday he found the front feeling that he wanted and felt more normal again. So yeah, but they use slightly different fork setups. Jack doesn't run the extensions; it's just the normal forks, and then Brad has those small extensions on there.
Do we have any carbon frame developments? I feel like it's our favorite topic on the podcast.
At KTM, you mean?
Yeah.
Nothing really. I mean, they have like some small differences. There's like these kind of small metal inserts that aren't too far away from where the swing arm pivot is. And on some of the chassis, those are slightly different and they've developed over time. But in terms of looking at the actual carbon frame, it doesn't look any different to how it did, when they first brought it. I'm sure that maybe it's layered up slightly differently inside and there'll be changes that we can't see. But at the minute, it looks like it's all just how it was.
Did Pedro test anything new, or did he just stick to getting comfortable with the bike?
He tested the aero, but that was it. And then also the different air intake. I don't know if you noticed over the weekend, Danny had a different shaped air intake.
It was stuck at his front spoiler at the front tire.
Oh,
this little thing.
Yeah. I don't know if he tested that or not. I think Augusto tested the little front fender wing. But yeah, like a small thing. But no, Pedro didn't test anything new in terms of like the chassis or whatever.
Regarding chattering, we briefly touched on Ducati, and there was apparently a meeting in Bologna where the top bosses of Ducati came all together to discuss this meeting and to discuss this topic and try to find a solution. And what was or not particularly weird about the meeting, but in general, the Ducati chattering issue, you would think, okay, maybe the old Ducati, the GP23, doesn't have it. But apparently it still does, because it's a fundamental thing inside Ducati, which has been brought basically up to daylight with the new Michelin tire, which is providing, I believe, it's just a new front tire, right? And it's providing more grip, and therefore the whole Ducatis, I mean, doesn't care if it's a GP23 or GP24, the tire will provide some chattering for the bike. So do we know anything about the meeting which happened there in Bologna?
No, not a clue.
Okay.
They said that they had the meeting and it was purely to discuss the chattering thing and come up with some solutions and to dive into the data and try to diagnose where it's coming from. And they said from that meeting they were going to try to bring something to solve the issue. But in Jerez, we asked about it and they said they didn't have anything there to test to solve the issue on Monday because they didn't suffer from chattering there at the weekend. So I don't know about the GP23s. I'm not sure if they have suffered from it. I know that,
I've heard something.
yeah, I know that in preseason testing they didn't, but maybe they have since. But I haven't.
But in preseason testing, the 24s didn't as well, right?
Martin did, and also Enea had a small amount of it, but Pecco was fine.
Okay, because which is weird, because later on I've read that Enea is the one who isn't suffering too much from the chattering because of his riding style.
Well, I think in testing, Enea just put it down to he thought it was maybe the tire or something. He didn't think it was an issue because it was only a very, very small vibration he had, he said. So I think at that point they didn't think it was the bike. They thought it was the riding style, which is why Martin was suffering with it a lot and they just put it down to him.
What did they bring in terms of aero?
Nothing. Ducati.
Because I've seen some pictures of Ducati with just the carbon, let's say, side, not the upper part, the lower part, and there was some duct tape on it. So I thought it's a new aero thing they're trying to test.
Maybe, unless it was just. I know that in testing, when they were using just the black fairings, like they had some duct taping just over the joins on the aero on those side fairings. So maybe it was just that, but I didn't see anything in pit lane when I was down there.
Okay. And Mark tested the thumb brake.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know what the benefits are, if he liked it, if Mark is now even stronger with the thumb brake?
I don't know in particular what he said about the thumb brake. I didn't do his interview. But the benefits of the thumb brake are essentially it's in some scenarios it's easier for you to use the thumb brake than it is with the rear brake on the rear foot, like it is usually. Like when you're banked over in the corners, you can use the thumb brake a lot easier than you can the foot rear brake. The other thing is you can put, this is kind of the opposite, you can put a lot more pressure through the foot brake than you can with the thumb. Obviously, the thumb's quite weak, and then this is why riders choose to use the scooter lever instead, because you can generate more braking pressure by pulling it with your index finger or your first two fingers, as some riders do, than you can with pushing with your thumb. So, but if it's a pure thing of like him using it in the middle of the corner, he's not going to want too much pressure from the rear brake. So the thumb rear brake there works quite well.
And I've listened to Matt Oxley's podcast recently, where he talked about Gigi Dall'Igna wants Mark in the factory team.
Yeah.
Are there any things we should know about this?
In terms of rumors, you mean?
Well, do you know something, or do you have picked up on something there?
Honestly, no. We were talking about it in the office. Actually, in the office, we have a little kind of sweepstake, and it's who do you think will be Pecco's teammate in 25? And most of us have gone, that it will just be Enea again. So, yeah, it's honestly a big mystery. big mystery. There's interestingly Mauro Grisili, the man that took over from Paolo Ducati as the sporting director. He seems that he's quite a funny character because it seems that every time he speaks to the media, he maybe gives away like one more thing than he should do, um, which is possibly why he doesn't speak to the media so much. So it's quite entertaining. So it's always great fun when it's like, oh, we were interviewing Chris Illy today. Okay, let's see what he says. He said about the decision regarding who will be Pecco's teammate for 25, he said that it's not just a sporting decision, it's also a marketing and everything, which obviously everyone knows this, that it is. Everything in our sport is marketing, it's politics, it's money, it's the whole shebang. But it's very, very interesting that in his answer, he specifically outlined that it's more than just a sporting decision.
So Valentino's coming.
Yeah, Rossi's coming out of retirement. If you want to make big money, that would be the way to do it. The second biggest money would be put Marc Marquez on it. But yeah, there's obviously a whole politics thing there with Ducati being Italian, and they're extremely proud that they have an Italian world champion and an Italian on the second bike that's winning races or can win races. But at the end of the day, if you have the opportunity to go and put Marc Marquez on a factory Ducati alongside what will either be a 2 or a 3-time MotoGP world champion next year, that's a hell of a marketing sales pitch. Like, that is a fantastic storm. So we'll see. But just from Grisili's answer, I think maybe the possibility of it is higher than we maybe think.
And the thing is, you saw what Pedro did on the KTM, and at this stage in Pedro's career, he is not as good as Marc. So you could maybe think that if you're Ducati, you don't want to lose Marc. You see all of his telemetry, all of his data and stuff, that he is somewhat special, as we all know. You don't want to lose him to KTM because this seems to be a pretty realistic destination for him with the Red Bull connections. And then you would have to sort out the Brad Binder thing. But you can always put him into Gasgas because he has a KTM contract, I suppose. And
yeah, they can essentially do what they like. Yeah.
So I think that they are maybe evaluating what would be the best case scenario in terms of one of their 3 riders, because realistically 3 riders are competing for this factory seat. Marc, Enea, and Jorge. What's like the worst case scenario that could happen? Probably Marc going to KTM and beating them. Or maybe they know, okay, if Jorge goes, he's not going to be as competitive as Marc. And if Enea goes, he's not going to be as competitive as Marc. So maybe it's something about this one, just keeping him close, you know?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely that element of, now that they've got him, they want to keep a hold of him. They don't want anyone else to have Marc Marquez. I mean, why would you? And also they're seeing how close the KTM is now, that for sure, if KTM all of a sudden landed this dream team and had Marc and Acosta, like, that is one hell of a title challenge there with either of them, you know. There's some points, to be fair, to point out. Obviously, Ducati is heavily Monster associated now. That would be a big issue to jump around. You know, Marc Marquez is Red Bull's poster boy in Spain and in a large majority of Europe for motorcycles, around the world for motorcycles. So that's probably a bigger issue than maybe we think. And then there's also the thing that, you know, he has to, if they put him on the bike, like, he has to outperform Enea and Martin, which is, for Marc, shouldn't be too much of a problem. Obviously, it's going to be difficult, but Jorge at the minute is looking fantastic.
When he isn't crashing.
When he isn't crashing, but he is looking bloody good. You know, like, he looks like he's taken a step forward in terms of maturity. Still not 100%. Like, you know, he did crash
like
at the weekend.
It's like the worst possible moment in this season to talk about Jorge's maturity.
Yeah. But, like, what is it? 6 podiums or something so far this year. So he's definitely a step better than what he was last season. But ironically, I also think Jorge is the least likely to end up on that factory Ducati if he doesn't win the title.
Well, I thought all Jorge has to do is lead the championship by the summer break, and this deal should be done because you can't argue leading the championship,
Yeah.
And he has done himself so much harm with this crash, not just because he lost potentially 25, let's see, at least 16 points, but we got this amazing battle between Pecco and Mark, and now the storyline is between them, and Jorge is all of a sudden out of the picture, and he had a chance to participate in this battle, maybe even win, and therefore getting all the momentum, and now it looks like Mark got all of his momentum that Martin built over the first 3 races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. If he does lead the championship, I think they said that they're going to take the decision around Mugello, which is very close.
I heard Kazakhstan.
Well, we'll see. I can imagine the initial plan was Mugello, but now with the headache that Mark is getting better and Jorge's had this crash, for sure the decision will be pushed back, I think. But, I agree with you that if he had been leading the championship and, he continues to podium as frequently as he has been, it's really, really hard to turn him down. But, if you do that, you also have to turn down the opportunity of Marc Marquez. And I think that even if from Ducati, I don't know their personal thoughts, of course, but say if Davide Tardozzi is less open to the idea of having Marc on the bike, I think Gigi would be the opposite. I think Gigi Dall'Igna would want Marc Marquez to be on his bike because then it's the best bike in the world and the best rider in the world. And I think that will be a big push from Gigi, and I think it will make a big difference.
I wanted to initially talk about Frankie, but I think we are just a quick run, like 1 or 2 minutes. Like it's his first test with Ducati.
Yeah.
So what did he do? Just adjust his riding style to the Ducati, or did he test anything?
He didn't test anything in terms of parts. Like the GP24 riders, from what I saw anyway, didn't have anything in terms of parts. But Frankie did like some really basic stuff that he would have done on day one of testing, preseason testing. Like he tried a couple of different ergonomic tank covers for his legs when he's leaning in the corners, and he just did a bunch of work on settings as well. Just tried some different things, tried some things that he likes, and it sounded like a really, really positive day for him. Like he made an improvement with just the comfort on the bike, and that essentially means the speed as well. So, yeah, really positive day for Frankie, and I think everyone has not been surprised, but just pleasantly reminded of the fact that Frankie is a very good rider, and with more time on that bike, he will for sure be up front, battling for podiums and hopefully race wins.
Yeah, 100%. And it's super unfortunate that he missed the winter tests and lost so much time to adapt to the new bike. So last manufacturer, before I have some general topics I would like to discuss with you, as you've seen. And with Aprilia, what do we know about the clutch? Because a little backstory. Not Jerez, after Kota, I made a podcast with a fellow meme creator, and he happened to be in Kota and got some paddock pass experience sponsored by Dorna, which was very nice by you guys. And he was in the Aprilia box, actually, and he basically said you could make photos of everything and stuff, but the one thing where they said you have to take the phone down, where they put those covers on, is when they were changing something with the clutch. And what do we know about the Aprilia clutch, and did they bring any updates, and what's the deal with it? Because it seems to be a big mystery.
Yeah, well, the start performance is an ongoing mystery. Well, Aprilia, was it last year? It might have been year before. It might have been 22, I think it was 22. They were the first to bring a carbon clutch. So in a usual clutch, the the plates. I forget what material they are, but they're not carbon. So you have steels and then the clutch plates, which, bloody hell, can't remember the material. Anyway, so they changed it so that they have these carbon clutches. Honda quickly followed suit. Like they built a carbon clutch. They tested it for a while, and I think they even used it in some races in 23. But then they went back to the traditional one, and now I think they're back to the carbon one. But I'd have to check. But the whole idea around the carbon clutch was to be more robust for the amount of torque that they put through it, and also to still give a good feel. Because the feel when the rider lets the lever out is the most important thing, aside from the electronics, managing that torque and power. And it's really strange that they keep having these inconsistent starts, and particularly Maverick. And I think most of it is Maverick is just not particularly amazing at starts, and that is something as a rider that can happen. Like me, when I raced motocross as a kid, my worst thing was starts. I could just never, ever do them consistently good. And it's always a thing. Like that is Maverick's one thing where he'll never be a fantastic starter every time. And the example is Aleix on Monday at the test, did a lot of practice starts, probably saw him do 5 or 6 practice starts through the day. And every single one of them was pretty bloody good, like really smooth, good launch off the line and continued, not wheeling and stuff like this. And Maverick, every time Maverick went to do the start, he would either bobble and the front wheel would come up and it would slap back down, or he would, you could hear the engine note and the engine would bog down and all this sort of stuff. He would not get the best start, but every single time it would be bad in a different way, which I think shows just a bit of inconsistency with how Maverick does his starts. The other thing as well is that Maverick's got this like combined rear brake and clutch lever. I don't know if you've seen about this.
I've heard about it.
Yeah.
And I've heard that this was the reason for his Portimao crash, but he doesn't want to admit it.
Oh, yeah?
Oxley talked about it, that he thinks Maverick grabbed the rear brake and therefore the rear snapped because he thought he was grabbing the clutch.
Ah, okay. That would make sense. Yeah. Oxley might be right on that one. Anyway, so this clutch lever, this is one of the predicaments with it. He has to flip a little lever, which then flips the mechanical switch inside the hydraulic system to put it onto the other hydraulic system so he can then operate the rear brake. And there's been people saying, like, what if he forgets and he pulls it by accident, thinking it's the clutch or thinking it's the rear brake? He can get himself into sticky situations. And even if he crashes in the race, but it's only a small tip off, and he goes to pull the clutch in to save the engine, to keep it running like he would do naturally, but instead he pulls the rear brake and he kills the engine, so there's all this sort of stuff. But this clutch
Just
system...
don't crash.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the optimal thing. But this clutch system has been an ongoing thing, and he has it on one of his bikes, and on the other one he doesn't. He has the 2 separate levers. So obviously he's still not 100% happy with it and is getting used to it, and Aprilia are making changes.
Our favorite topic, the carbon frame, originally started with Aprilia, and then all of a sudden KTM developed one. So do we know something? Did Lorenzo Savadori maybe test the thing?
No, I didn't see it at all, again. So whether they've completely gone back to the drawing board and are designing something entirely new, we don't know. But it's for sure this carbon frame that looked like was going to appear at the racetracks pretty quickly has disappeared for now. It's like a fart in the wind. It's gone.
Okay, but they brought the updated Batmobile rear.
They did, yeah.
Where it looks less, let's say, less aggressive.
Yeah, so it's basically just combined this year's tail unit and last year's. It's taken the underseat diffuser from the 24 tail unit, but instead of then having the flat and slightly kicked surface on top of the actual tail unit itself to provide a little bit of downforce, that's not there. It's like the smoothed over version that was there on the 23. So it's essentially the top half is the 23 tail unit and the bottom half is the 24.
And what benefits does this provide?
The diffuser was meant to provide a lot of downforce in the corner as well. And then also coming out of the corner was meant to help with some rear grip. What Maverick felt was that he just couldn't be consistent with it. I can't remember specifically what he said now in testing, but he felt he just didn't like the balance of the bike and how it was with so much downforce on the rear and it being constantly pulled into the ground by the diffuser. So taking away that top level surface should hopefully take away a little bit of the power of how much downforce it was pulling and putting on the back, on the rear. So we'll see. But to be honest, Maverick did, I think, like 2 or 3 runs with that new kind of half and half tail unit and then just used his normal one for the rest of the day. And even Oliveira tried it. He did like 2 runs and then went back to the 23 tail unit just as he's been using to.
So just put more downforce on the front and it will be the normal balance again.
I mean, maybe. They said that they have an updated aero coming soon, so maybe
put the
they'll
Yamaha front wing with 3 wings like on it.
Yeah.
Or put even 4 on it. Who's going to stop you?
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then you have the old balance back.
Mm-hmm.
But probably chattering.
Yeah, probably.
So I've read that they brought a new ride height device.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while now, I've been reading about the possibility of them having, not just Aprilia, but in general MotoGP teams, having automatic ride height devices, which know where you are on track and then lower the rear automatically to fire out of the corners. And as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, Aprilia, they run a manual one where you have to basically activate it manually. So do you know anything about the new ride height device? And is it automatic? What benefits? I would suppose it's just faster. But what do you know about it?
It's still manual. I'll come on to the whole thing about the automatic ride height devices in a little bit. But it's still manual. And apparently, I didn't get a real good look at the Aprilia in the test, to be fair. But supposedly, Crafar was saying it looks like it allows it to go a little bit lower, which is what Ducati did with their updated tail unit and ride height device last year. All of a sudden, you could see that the Ducati could squat quite a bit lower, and that just helps bring the center of gravity down of the bike so you can accelerate harder off the corner and also off the start for the whole shot. So that's the deal with that. And probably it's a big reason why Aleix did so many practice starts as well during the test, and then also just using it out on track too. The whole automatic ride height device thing is something that was going on for a fair while, and I think it was Aprilia actually that did it first. And it's not automatic, so like it completely does it itself. It's not like it knows where it is around the circuit and then it can just drop at a certain point. I don't think that's actually allowed by the rules. It still was manual, but what it was kind of a, should we say, semi-automatic. There you go. You would push the button before the corner, and then what we think the system was that then when the front forks unloaded, when you got on the power out of the corner, once they got to a certain point, it then triggered the rear to drop. So it wasn't like the rider in the time had to push the button, and then that's what made it drop. They would like pre-arm the system before the corner, come out the corner, forget about it, not worry about it. But then once the front fork came up, then it would drop the rear. But they ditched that system, I think, at like start of 23 or maybe like halfway through 23, because the riders kind of they just wanted the control back of when they could drop it. That was why. So yeah, I don't know if there's any more developments in like the automatic system or not, but at the minute everything's manual.
Okay, and last point in my notes for Aprilia is that Lorenzo Savadori tested the 25 engine during the race weekend.
Oh yeah?
I've read.
Okay.
That's what I've read. I don't know if this is true. Maybe I read some bullshit.
No, it probably is. I just didn't take too big of a notice of Sava.
Yeah, which was, I mean, he crashed pretty early too. But it was a little bit surprising to me because usually when you are not Honda and Yamaha, who are deep in the shit, it's pretty early for a new engine. As you said earlier, usually around Misano you get the new bike. So, do you know anything about the 25 engine?
No, I don't know too much. But I mean, Savadori, like, he always has a lab bike, and those lab bikes usually have a lot of changes we can't see. And they're often quite secretive in terms of what's on Savadori's bike. Aprilia are pretty good at telling us what's on the race bikes, but the Savadoris, they're like, no, you can figure it out for yourself. So to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if even last year, the year before, Sava, when he's done his wild cards, obviously he wasn't allowed to use those different engine specs during the wild card. I think he had to run the normal spec, which actually I think he's even not allowed to do now, to be fair. I'll have to check the rules. Maybe he just tested it in the test on Monday. But yeah, probably in their private tests, Aprilia have always done running with the next season's engine this early.
So, in general, we have 5 manufacturers on the grid, and we've already talked a little bit about test riders. You said like the best test rider is 2 seconds off the pace, but really understands the motorcycle, like Michele Pirro. If you would have to rank Stefan Bradl, Kel Crutchlow, Dani Pedrosa, Pirro, and Savadori, who would be first, second, up until fifth for you?
I don't know. It's tricky. Like, your test rider, the trouble is with a test rider, like, it's definitely better if they're, kind of 1 second off, whatever. But they can't be too slow. Like, they still need to be able to put in a lap, which is kind of that 1 second or within a second of the factory riders. But against that rule, like, Savadori has also done a great job with Aprilia, but then it's how much of that machine is Savadori making the difference and how much of it is the engineers making the difference, and also Aprilia's communication and the way that they work and all this sort of stuff. Because for sure, Cal Crutchlow is a fantastic test rider. Everyone has always said about Cal that he has amazing feel and all this sort of stuff. And Yamaha have brought in some fantastic people. I can't remember the name of the guy that they brought in this year, but Cal actually worked with him in 2014 at Ducati, the 1 year he had at Ducati. And he was like kind of the head of the project, or Gigi's second-hand man or something like that at the time. And he said he's the best guy he's worked with by far. And he's now at Yamaha, So Yamaha have everything they need. And they also have a good test rider, for sure. I think it's pretty hard to, like, even more than the race riders, it's hard to order a top 5 for the test riders. You could say that Danny's the best test rider, but also Danny is 5'2" and weighs 52 kilos, which is completely different to Brad and everyone else on the KTM. So,
and it's suboptimal if you want to step in a boxing ring.
yeah, especially when you're going up against Jorge Lorenzo, that probably weighs, a good 85 kilos, 90 kilos now. So,
I mean, it's always funny just to go there for a second. Because in general, Jorge's not fat.
No, he's not.
No, he's a perfectly normal human being. He's
chunky.
In retirement. Yeah, he's in retirement and everything.
Yeah.
He deserved it.
Yeah.
But when you post those mirror selfies of you with the belly and stuff, it's kind of asking for it to make fun of. So this whole habit of Jorge being a fat ass just is established. And it's quite funny how this whole thing went. That, like, even Miguel Oliveira said he's not in shape anywhere close to where his 14-year-old cousin is. So.
Yeah. I mean, Jorge is a meme. Like, he's just funny. But yeah, as you say, he's enjoying himself. He's in retirement. Of course, he's allowed to put a bit of weight on, like it's normal. And as you say, he's not fat either. Like, I always think of, I think it was Ricky Carmichael when he retired, the motocross rider. Ricky, after he retired, got really fat. And then now he's lost all the weight again. He's skinny again. And the same happened with James Stewart, another motocross rider. James, actually, when he retired, he said the first thing he wanted to do was get fat because he was never allowed to do it in his racing career. So he did. He got fat. He put on like fucking 30 kilos, he said, or something like that. And then he lost it again. So, Jorge probably did the same. Just didn't care, ate what he wanted, drank what he wanted, partied when he wanted to. I mean, we know because he put it all on Instagram. So, but yeah, it'll be hilarious if those two actually have a boxing match.
I don't think it's going to happen.
I reckon it will, I really reckon it will.
I'm happy to be wrong. But my favorite Jorge picture is him standing in front of the mirror with his belly out, and it has like dedication written basically on it or something. Yeah. So if you post something like this, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah.
To go back to the real topic.
Yeah.
I accepted that you don't want to rank test riders. And I would happily say Stefan Bradl is at least last.
You think he's last,
in my opinion? Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like him, and the results don't necessarily speak for him. So, and I've heard stuff that Mark isn't a big fan of his, or wasn't when he was at Honda, because his riding style was totally different than his.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think this could be a reason for Honda's downfall. But not to repeat ourselves and go back to Honda, I would like to ask you something. Since you know everything about the 27 rules, you probably also know about a hypothetical development freeze, where manufacturers basically would come together and say, we don't develop our bikes anymore after the end of the 24 season because it's all getting ridiculous with aerodynamic and stuff. We are too fast for most of the circuits. Look at Pedro's crash in warm-up. I mean, that's literally how Luis Salom died, and he was so lucky that he was not even slightly injured. So there's a good argument for a development freeze. There's also one, or let's say two arguments against it, which are Honda and Yamaha. You can't give them concessions 1 year and then don't let them use it 1 year later. So what do you know about the development freeze? What's your opinion on it?
I mean, this is honestly the first time I've heard of like a full development freeze. I know that a fair while ago now, well, I say fair while ago, probably like 5-6 weeks ago, Pit Byra had said about that we need to do something about aero sooner. To be honest, like if they do say, right, maybe for the last season or the last 2 seasons of these regs before 27, we limit development, or maybe it's like they put a development freeze on everyone apart from Honda and Yamaha, and then Honda and Yamaha have the normal development where it's back to like one engine for the season and stuff like that. I don't know. Like, I honestly don't think that they will do anything like that. But yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing in my opinion, for sure. Like, they are too fast. They have too much power. The corner speeds are ridiculous. Like, we're gaining like half a second in terms of lap time everywhere we go this year. Like, that's fucking insane, And the Ducati has barely changed, really. Like, it's got a slightly better engine and it's got better aero, and that has gained half a second. So, yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, like, if this idea of a development freeze is a genuine thing, I haven't heard it, but it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world for sure.
Just to clarify things, I'm reading stuff all the time and I can't fact check them because I don't know if they're planning a development freeze. So I'm just throwing things at you and I don't know if they're true or not. So, could very well be that some news outlets are just reporting quite bullshit to get some clicks. I mean, I think, possible.
Yeah, it could be. But it's also like, if you think about it in terms of then for 27, like, obviously things are going to change. It's not like they're just updating their bikes. They'll need to develop new things and stuff like this. So if there was a development freeze, maybe it is a good idea that at least for the last season, it's like, right, you don't have to worry about your current bikes. You can put all your R&D into the new ones for next year. Like that's genuinely not a bad idea to save some money, saving resources, stress for the members of the team that are having to juggle making the current bike better and making the future bike better. So that's probably not a bad idea. But yeah, we'll see. See if anything happens.
So regarding the 27 rule set, what we know what could happen, again, you don't have to tell us anything. I'm just
I
thinking.
won't. So.
Yeah, totally understandable. I don't want to get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Is that the engine capacity will be reduced to 800cc. Aero will be reduced, ride-height device will be banned, and potentially BMW entering. And I had the thought recently after Kawasaki
And
pulled out
Bimota.
of
Yeah.
World Superbike that they maybe could enter MotoGP. Maybe Suzuki will re-enter.
Yeah.
Could also be possible. So it's exciting. And what I don't understand is why do you necessarily need to reduce the cubic capacity to the more or less exact same level where we had it a couple of years ago, which turned out to be shit. The bikes were faster in the corner. And if I was making the rules and I would like to come up with a different engine concept, I think it's a good idea, but still 1000cc. Because I think it sells just better. Every manufacturer has a 1000cc bike except KTM to sell. And I would significantly reduce the aero. That would be my thing, because crashes happened in the corner. Like, for example, Pedro's crash in warm-up. It was quite scary. And if he was, let's say, 10, 20 kilometers an hour, I don't know what's realistic, slower, this crash wouldn't be as bad, you know? And then I would like to reduce the fuel. So the engines naturally have less power because you can't consume as much fuel. You can't, well, to put it simply, the less energy you put into it, the less energy will come out.
Yeah.
And with the sustainable fuels, I think the power will go down naturally because the power density of fuel is just higher than of those e-fuels. So I don't necessarily understand the 800cc engine idea. And I would like to hear your opinion about all of this without actually telling us what's going on.
Yeah. I think obviously there's lots and lots of rumors, and there's some that are true, some that are not, about what the bike's going to be like in 27. But I think if you look in terms of the road bike market, there is a natural decline in the sale of superbikes and stuff like this. And there's always been a relation between kind of what bikes we see in Superbike, MotoGP, and what's actually on the road type thing. And you see now this rise of kind of sport bikes that are roughly between the 700 and 900cc range.
What bikes are you talking about?
Well, we have a lot of. I mean, they're not MotoGP bikes; they're not super bikes, are they? But the biggest sector of bikes that are being sold now are kind of sports bikes that are like the 690 Duke, and I can't remember the other names of the things now, but like the R7 and all these sorts of things, that have this capacity.
The R7 is a 2-cylinder, right?
It's twin cylinder, yeah. It's a smaller bike, but I'm trying to think of the names.
Just to rant a little bit, I don't understand why they put the women on the R7 when they want to build a platform to get women into the real world championship, where they are running completely different bikes. Like, I would understand to put them on R6s and then have a smooth transition to World Supersport, but I have no idea and no clue why they put them on fucking R7s. Those things, I haven't ridden one, but are apparently quite awful when you compare it to an R6.
Well, they're slower than an R6, yeah. Yeah,
it's preference, I guess, but I don't know, and this is not going to be the topic of this podcast. But I just don't understand it. I have no idea why they're doing it, and to me, it's just incompetence.
Well, Yeah, that is a strong opinion on the whole matter. I mean, yeah, I have my own opinions. Some parts I like of it, some parts I don't particularly like of it. I don't necessarily mind the fact that they're on R7s, but again, it's like okay, they're on R7s, but the championship, in my opinion, never really should be this kind of final destination type thing like this. This end
Of course,
result.
yeah.
It should always be they move on to the things. I genuinely do think that it's the championship is marketed at getting young girls onto a good stage, and I think the R7 is a good bike for young girls to come in and ride, not just young girls but young boys as well. Like if there was more R7s, like I think in British Superbikes this year they have a what they call it, like a sport bike cup or something, which is essentially like the R7 and then the Aprilia 660 and all this sort of stuff. And I think that's great. I do think that's good for getting more riders in on bikes that are not just little motor threes, that will teach them different skills and better skills to move on to bigger bikes, and they're cheap bikes to run. So I do think there's a benefit there that hopefully some of the women that are going to race in that championship can come in and they'll have Anna Carrasco to aim for.
There
Um,
was definitely not a R7 in your background, I believe.
no, certainly not.
Did you hear the bike?
Yeah, it sounded like a 600 or something or 1,000. But I think if some of those young women could come into the Women's World Championship and have Anna Carrasco to aim for, and hopefully some of them can be with her, and then by the end of the year beat her, it would be great to see some of them get a ride in Supersport 600. Yeah. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
my view on the whole thing.
Yeah. And to come back to MotoGP, we already talked about the new Michelin front tire. And we always had this front tire pressure issue. And the new one is apparently harder from not from the carcass, but from the rubber in itself, and provides more grip. And I believe the nature of it being harder should provide better stability when under temperature, and the increased grip should encounter the lost grip when you're in dirty air, I believe. But what's your whole take on the new tire?
I mean, they've done some initial tests on like the early versions of it. End of last year, I think was the first test they had on it. I can't, or maybe it was Misano last year. I can't remember. And yeah, as you say, the idea of the Michelin front is to be less susceptible to big changes in temperature, so that it doesn't change the pressure so much inside the front tire. And yes, it's I think a stronger compound, but the construction of the tire is still the same, and it's meant to give better grip and better longevity and all this sort of stuff. I believe that they will test it at Mugello, but I'm not sure. And yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. Like the aero loads have obviously got a lot higher over the last few years. And so hopefully this tyre will limit that problem even more. Obviously, this year already, with them reducing the lower limit for the pressure, we've seen a lot less in terms of tyre pressure infringements. Obviously, we saw a bunch in Jerez in the sprint, but it was a bit of a weird scenario with lots of empty spaces on track because so many riders crashed out. The tarmac was a lot colder than what we would have expected. So there was a bunch of issues there. But so far this year, I don't think I've really heard one rider say, "Oh, I had high tire pressure all race and it ruined my race." I don't think there's.
Well, Mark basically said that it prohibited him from attacking Pecco later on.
Yeah, but for a couple of laps when he was pushing really hard, I haven't heard one rider say that like they had after the first couple of laps of pressure went skyrocketed and it never came down. So I think at least it's shown that rule change with the lower pressure limit has been a positive impact.
So, last thing, do you want to get anything off your chest? Anything we didn't talk about?
Not particularly. I think that Pecco showed at the weekend just how good he is and how good he's building himself to be. Like he did what Mark does to everyone. he put the bike in there and he made Mark take the decision of we make contact and maybe we go down and maybe we don't. And I think even though Pecco's this nice guy and he's not a kind of out there and brash character, I think people forget that he's a proper bastard. Like he's not afraid of anyone.
He showed Mark that he's the bigger alpha in this scenario.
Yeah, in this scenario, we'll see what happens in Le Mans. But
I think that Portimao had a big implication on how Jerez played out, because Pecco showed Mark back then that he won't back down. And I think Mark knew this from his last encounter, because if Pecco would have backed down there, Mark would have closed the door on him and thought, okay, you made it back then, so you will do it again, and I'm just going to bully you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Pecco kind of showed him, even though they went down, he showed him, okay, I'm not going to back out because I'm the number one rider here. You're the satellite rider.
Yeah.
And he had this same attitude again in Jerez. So,
no, I agree. I think Pecco is slowly building himself into one of the greats. Like he's kind of perfected the Dovi method, if you know what I mean, where he's not he's incredibly talented for sure, but he's not like a God-given alien that, like Marquez or even Acosta, that seems like he's one of these guys. He in his MotoGP career, he's had to work and get built better slowly over time. But I think we'll look back at Pecco once he's done in his days in MotoGP and be like, he is one of the best ever.
I think he is underappreciated because he can be so incredibly stupid. Like if he is comfortable, like in India, for example, or in Austin last year, he can be so damn stupid. And he's like his worst enemy. But when he's under pressure, like in both of his championships seasons in MotoGP, he has been extraordinary. And then you have those rides like Mandalika, you have those rides like Aragon and Jerez, it's huge. And he can be so incredibly good when he's under pressure and when he's on.
Exactly, yeah. And when he's under his biggest pressure is when he executes the best. He's incredible.
And I believe he was angry because Brad Binder is such a fucking dumbass.
Wait, I mean, why?
That sequence in the sprint race where Brad Binder overtook Marc Marquez in the last corner and sent him wide and couldn't even properly exit the corner himself because his rear slipped because he was so out of place.
Mm-hmm.
That was firstly super stupid because he lost so much time by himself, And then to go in this gap, yes, there was a gap, but it was so tiny, he was never going to make it. To just kick Pecco out of the race is stupid as well. And the epitome of stupid is Freddie Spencer for kind of encouraging this behavior, apparently. But let's get not into the stewards because then we will be here for another hour.
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciated talking to you. I'm very grateful that you take your time, your free time that you could spend with anybody else, but you chose to record this podcast with me. And I don't know how many episodes we are in.
I think we've done 5, maybe.
5, yeah. I would say 5 from my gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very grateful. And I wish you all the best. Hopefully we can do a few more this season. And
absolutely,
maybe we'll see each other in Barcelona.
Yeah,
Barcelona this time. Because I guess Rocco's, we will be there again.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And yeah, of course. But you were at home over Christmas.
Yeah, I think I flew like year, right? 2 days before. So something like that.
Yeah, we missed each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always enjoy coming to Spain in the winter because it's such a nice weather there. I'm super jealous.
Compared to Berlin, a bit cold over there, eh?
Yeah, but I don't want to be there right now in the summer because here it's like 28 degrees and I'm sweating all the time,
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite hot. But it's quite humid as well, and I think Spain is more dry.
It's not too bad, but in August here, it's like, it's so humid. August is... pretty horrible, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you very much. I wish you a great evening and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.